Hi, welcome to a Further Inquiry podcast. I'm Matthew Genorio, Editor-in-Chief of Further Inquiry. Further Inquiry is a place for playing gracefully with ideas. We are a reader-supported publication for free inquiry, brazen critique, and dissenting ideas.
Hi, and I'm Khadija Khan, a journalist and editor at A Further Inquiry. Matthew and I jointly host this podcast monthly. You can support our work by becoming a paid subscriber to A Further Inquiry today. Today we have a new episode of AFI, and with us we have Iram Ramadan. Before I introduce Iram to you all, I would like to say something. It is very hard and it takes immense amount of courage to speak out against injustice wherever it rears its ugly head. However, it becomes even harder when it's something which is injustice against those vulnerable section of your community or outside of the community in the mainstream society, and you speak out facing immense peers pressure, community pressure, and family pressure. And we have very few people who have this courage to speak out against the problems within our own community. And one of those people is Iram Ramadan. She's with us today. She is a journalist and commentator with a focus on foreign affairs and social issues, particularly on British Muslims. She is a co-host of the podcast Taking the Myth. Today we're going to talk about the grooming gang scandal. I know there have been so many conversations, debates, and discussions on this issue, and people they have so many perspective on this topic. However, it's very rare when we get to listen to the perspective which is coming from within the community, how they see this problem, and what is the solution, how to tackle this issue, not only outside of the community in the mainstream society, but also within the community. So welcome, Iram, to AFI podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and we would love to hear from you about the article you just wrote on this issue recently.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's good to talk with like-minded person on this subject, and also to talk about this issue without veering into whataboutery and the denials that we often see, but at the same time, not to get too hyperbolic about it. So there's quite a few layers to this issue, as I've mentioned in my recent article. But yes, I'm really looking forward to going through some of those the different takes on it for you.
So we know that what is this scandal, and this has become a national disgrace, the way authorities have turned their eyes blind to the plight of these girls, refuse to protect them, refuse to take, instant action in order to bring those perpetrators to justice. And many of them are walking free, in the same town where they committed such heinous crimes. So what is the reaction from within the community? Because we know all about the scandal, we know the figures, we know how massive scale of this problem we are grappling with. However, the reaction from within the community, that is something which is rarely talked about. And whenever it's bring about in a discussion, there has been a very passive, uh, reaction from within the community.
Yes, so just last week there was a demonstration in Dewsbury, which is in West Yorkshire, and it was organized by a group called Fighting for Fair Trials. And the woman who runs it, Samira Khan, her brother Irfan was convicted last year of grooming offences, um, you know, threatening to kill and rape as well. And I think it's bad enough that he has committed these awful crimes. But what made it worse was the fact that she has come out and on her group insisting that he's some sort of a victim here. He's the victim of a miscarriage against justice. So not the girls who were abused or raped, trafficked. No, men like him are the real victims, according to her. And in this group, on this on their Facebook page and on their TikTok channel, they've been having discussions about this subject. And a couple of months ago, there was a program on Channel 4 about the grooming scandal, and there was discussion on that. And they were insisting that some of the girls are lying about this, that they're just out to get money, and these people, I don't know if they're all from the same town or if they all know each other in that way, but certainly they all seem to come from Pakistani or Kashmiri communities, and they were saying very defamatory things about these victims, and some of them were naming the victims. And for people who are unaware of this, under British law, anyone who is a victim of a sexual crime, alleged or proven, that person has anonymity unless they waiver that anonymity. They have to put it in writing and say, I will speak out. If there's somebody speaks out about their abuse, they have to declare it. Otherwise, they're given anonymity. And some of the people on this chat were naming these girls, which they're not allowed to, and saying just really awful things about them, which I just found quite disturbing, to be honest with you. They were young girls when they were targeted, and children under the law. And instead of having sympathy with their ordeal, they're making the men, the convicted rapists, out to be the victims. And I just found this absolutely appalling. And what we saw on Saturday was these people from this group, spearheaded by Irfan's sister, demonstrating, holding placards about these innocent men and how men can be victims of injustice, and how law can sometimes innocently target these men. And I just thought to myself, it's there's so much discussion on this subject, and too often what we're seeing online is people, I wouldn't say just on the right, but let's say predominantly the right, who think that there's a massive problem with all Pakistanis or all Muslims. And a lot of them think that their families and their communities are complicit in this. And initially, my response would be, well, they're not. Sometimes they don't know what's going on. They can be victims as well. Some of these men can be abusive towards their own family members as well. But then it becomes very difficult to defend the community when you have people like that out on the streets defending these men. And I just think, what planet are they living on? Like, they're really not helping the cause. They're not helping their communities, because it makes everybody look bad. And, it tarnishes everybody with the same brush as well. So that's why I decided to write my piece, because I think there's an element from within, our own communities, that just does not want to accept that this crime, these crimes, plural, happened, that these children were targeted. And I'm not saying that everybody is in denial about this, but I think there's a certain section of these communities that just don't want to accept this happened, for whatever reasons.
Well, it's very brave of you, to be very honest. I must acknowledge that it takes a tremendous amount of courage to talk about this issue specifically when there is a huge pressure, from certain section of the Muslim community to, label every conversation around this issue as Islamophobia. I mean, it's strange. We know that it's pure victim blaming, whatever is happening in such kind of protest. And I'm just hoping there was this one protest, there was not a widespread uh, protest of such kind, because it's appalling to even imagine that these men who are involved in these crimes against children, they can be treated as innocent, even in thinking about it, just make me feel so disgusting. Uh, Tell us about your experience when you speak out against uh, this issue in particular and the other issue. Because to be very honest, every community has their fair share of problems, fair share of bad apples, and this is not something unique to Pakistani community or Muslim community. However, in this issue, in this crime, there is a disproportionate representation of Pakistani Muslim men, and we need to talk about it. However, I know the challenges uh, people face from within the community when they want to discuss this issue. What your personal experience has been?
So I think I've been having these discussions with my own family members or people in the community, just people of a similar background about this issue. And I've been having these talks since, well, when we first heard about these crimes, but we're going back, I think the first trial we heard about was maybe in 2010 or 2011. 2011 was Rotherham, and I think that's when it became evident just how big of a scandal this was. Because before that, there were, some trials in different parts of the country, but I think it was with Rotherham that I think everyone realized, wow, okay, this is huge. And I mean, I'll be 100% honest here. Even I in the beginning was uh, maybe a little bit in denial at first. I thought, yeah, it's not fair to blame all Pakistani men for this, or everybody in the Pakistani community. As you said, every community has its problems, right? But I think when you keep seeing the same issue again and again and again, I don't think you can continue to bury your head in the sand. And I think with the initial conversations, I remember there was a lot of victim blaming that, oh, look, it's these silly girls. Why were they out at night? What they doing outside? Why are they going off with these men? These girls are very, they're the ones who are trying to lure these men. And we're talking about teenage girls, right? The children. Um, and we're talking about them as though they're these like weird manipulative creatures who just ensnare these poor innocent unwitting men. And I was just really appalled by that. And bearing in mind this was about what 13, 14 years ago, but it's 2025. What conversations are we having now? And I find that there's maybe slightly less victim blaming now, but there's still, that what about you? Oh, but what about white communities? Oh, but 90% of pedophiles are white. 90% of criminals are white. And I think, well, yes, of course, we live in Britain, where the majority population is white. So of course you would expect to see that reflected in the statistics. But then when you see this kind of crime happening you see a disproportionate number of men from a certain background involved. And so you can't just keep saying, but what about white people? But what about the Catholic Church? What about this? We're talking about something very, very specific here. And I find that there's still that element there that people they don't want to be too specific because they're scared that they're going to be called racist or they're going to be called Islamophobic, um, or that they will be the far right will jump on the bandwagon. And I think it's a bit too late for that, because we've been in that denial mode and because we've not been as honest. Now you have all these conversations taking place, and the rhetoric is, I mean, especially online, the rhetoric can be so horrible, it can be divisive, it can be very polarizing. And people just come out with the usual, oh, deport them all, deport them all. And I think, well, what if they're born and brought up here? You can't just deport everybody. But as I said, this idea that, oh, well, I don't want to be used by a racist or the far right. Well, you don't have to. You don't have to speak with them on a platform if you don't want to. But if you, people like us from that background could talk about these issues honestly, and we have these conversations amongst ourselves, surely that would be more empowering, and it would take away the power from people who probably don't have good intentions. Whereas, maybe for people like us, we want to improve our communities, and we want to end any abuse or injustice. That's certainly one of the reasons why I do it. Whereas, you have certain people who just want to talk about this issue because maybe they just, there's an element of racism there. They want to just deport anybody who's of an Asian or Muslim background. And I think the reason why we've got to that point is because we've just not been having these conversations enough with ourselves. It's just, I remember when post Rotherham and you had imams reading out statements in mosques and telling young people about, how this behavior was un-Islamic, etc., etc., trying to be more educational. Okay, fine, do that. Whether you agree it's Islamic or not, that's, debatable. But fine, let's say it's, this is un-Islamic behavior. But it just seemed to be that they read this statement now. We had like this kind of momentum where everybody was discussing it for a short while, and then nothing happened after that. And I just think that should have been the right time when people should have actually continued doing some good work about this, educating boys, educating women about their rights. And I think especially from our communities, there's definitely a problem with misogyny. There's definitely a problem with some of the men and the way they view some girls and some women. And it's 2025 and we're still having the same conversations. And it's just very frustrating.
I couldn't agree with you more when you say that we need to take control when we are having a discussion on this issue. If we want to remove, a negative and unpleasant narrative from the situation, and of course we have to put the victims, the survivors, at the forefront of this issue. Do you think that, as you just mentioned, that there is certainly a problem of misogyny within the community, within the certain section of the community? Do you think there is a problem that takes, you can say, legitimacy, that seeks legitimacy, or derived legitimacy from religious teachings, religious discourse? Because you and me, we both know that there is no culture that can survive from, you know, from elimination, that comes from religion, because it cannot survive within the boundaries of religion if it is not embedded, in the core religious principle. So whatever culture we have within Muslim communities, we have different culture. However, they are the byproduct of those religious belief, religious culture. Somehow we can say there is a mixture, confusion, fusion of certain local cultures with the religious belief. However, there is religious, prominence in these community when it comes to cultural values. So, do you think that there is a problem with certain religious reading, which structure, which structures this kind of culture of misogyny, where women have been compartmentalized, non-Muslim into non-Muslim women. Then there is a women who don't wear religion on their sleeves, then women who don't wear hijab, and women who don't wear burqa, and those who cover from themselves from head to toe. So this compartmentalization of women on the basis of on the basis of their of the length of their clothing. Do you think that is a problem?
Definitely shaped some of their thinking. So I mean, their behavior, like their physical behavior with these girls, you could say was not exactly very Islamic. So, taking drugs, drinking alcohol, fornicating outside marriage, those are frowned upon in Islam. So, if someone was to say that their behavior was un-Islamic, then absolutely. However, I think, as you pointed out, like culture can be shaped in part or wholly by religion. There's this idea that the sexes should be segregated. Good or moral women are supposed to guard their chastity. They're supposed to dress modestly. They shouldn't be covered in any way. Um, and and if you're not covered, if you're not wearing, let's say, hijab or covering the rest of your body, then you're in a way inviting harassment upon yourself. So if you don't, I mean, it does say that in the religion, cover up so you're not harassed. So it does shape that kind of mentality towards women, that if you're not covered up in a certain way, then you can be blamed for being harassed or abused. Um, and and then there's also, I guess, whether this comes from culture or religion, there's this idea as well that these girls, because they're not from your background, they're not from your tribe. I think this is also a very tribal or clannish mentality as well. That if a woman or a female is not from your clan or your tribe, she doesn't really have the same level of honor as a woman from your family or your tribe. And therefore, in that sense, these girls, these white girls, they're kind of seen as easy targets in a way because, well, they don't have any honor. They don't have any standing, and therefore they're kind of like lower on the food chain. That doesn't necessarily mean that these men respect women from their own communities.
That's
Everybody knows that as soon as you step out of line, then you are vilified or you're ostracized. As long as you're, the good woman, you do everything you're told to do, then you're worthy of that respect. The moment you step out of line, then you don't deserve that same level of respect. And what we've seen, what we've heard of, I certainly have, is that the daughters or the wives of some of these men, they were abused themselves. They were either physically beaten or raped, because obviously marital rape is not seen as a thing. As soon as you're married, that's it. Your husband's property. You can't really say no to sex. And yeah, so it's not as if these women are necessarily respected more. They're respected more in the sense that they're seen as more marriage worthy, right? So these women are it's better for you to marry these women from your community and your tribe. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that they respect these women anymore. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and how about the leadership we have? To be very honest, we have quite a fair representation of our communities in politics, in arts, in every sphere of life in the UK. And it's quite prominent representation are the people from our community. They are quite vocal. And they are very much prominent in their assertion, about their rights, about their, you know, problems, whatever challenges they are facing in the UK. But when it comes to this problem of misogyny, whether it is in the mainstream society, in cases such as grooming gang scandal, or within the community when there is a problem of misogyny, they don't really want to talk about it. The very recent example, it's not very recent in time, but that comes to my mind is when Susan Hall, the conservative counselor, she asked Sadiq Khan about grooming gangs operating in London, and he dodged the question clearly. He didn't want to answer this question. In fact, he appeared to even deny the existence, of such problem in London, and he was pretending that as if he doesn't know what is grooming gang, what is this issue. So that was quite a shock for people like me, and definitely I can say that you must have had this huge disappointment, because our leaders, when are those people who represent us in political sphere, especially, when they refuse to acknowledge the existence of a problem, how we can ever hope to address that problem?
Yeah, I mean, I am quite disappointed by the caliber of political leaders that we have. Um, especially the ones elected from within our communities. And you have like a number of independent MPs now who have been elected, and you know, one of the things that they want to discuss is having an airport in Newport in Kashmir. Um,
So
or they want to talk
blurred.
about banning criticism of the Abrahamic faiths. And you just think that's that's the thing that you're most concerned about. I mean, an airport in a country that isn't even in Britain. This is an airport that's not in Britain. I mean, if you're campaigning for something here, fine. But this is something that's thousands of miles away. And okay, I get it. A lot of your constituents are probably from Kashmir, and maybe they've raised it with you. But if they want to raise with anyone, raise it with the Pakistani government, raise it with Pakistani
Exactly.
businessmen. Well, why are British MPs discussing the airport in Kashmir? It's and things like this are embarrassing. They're actually embarrassing. And it makes that face palm emoji. Like that is me most of the time these days. I am face palm emojiing every time these people open their mouths and they talk about irrelevant subjects, or they get very defensive. Like, one of the MPs raised the subject of cousin marriages in the UK, and they wanted to ban first cousin marriages. And I think it's Iqbal Muhammad, one of the independent MPs, stood up and said, "Oh, but people do it because it strengthens family values, blah blah blah." And I think, well, if you want to strengthen family values, just you know, do you need to get married to your family members to do that? You're already related by blood. it's just embarrassing because then everybody sees it and think, oh my God, all these Asians, all these Pakistanis, is that all they do? Oh my God, it's embarrassing, and then you get lumped in with all these people as well, and I just think like it's 2025, surely, um, at the level of our politicians should have got better than this, but no, they want to obfuscate, they want to deny any of the problems that we have. Yeah, what can I even say in response to that?
I find it also very surprising when they want to build an airport in a country which is not Britain. I mean, they don't represent British people's interest. I mean, just cherry picking constituents. This is also a problem with these politicians because since they are Muslim, they want to represent Muslims. And they forget somehow that they are living in a multicultural society. It's a diverse society, and their constituents are also from diverse background, from faith, from diverse faith. So they have to represent all of them when they are in parliament. It's a huge disappointment. I agree with you. And this victim mentality that we have been victimized. Islam has been victimized. I mean, this is the most ridiculous statement that come across, to be very honest. Islam has been victimized. Muslims have been victimized. I think that Muslims, they enjoy more rights in Britain than they enjoy in any other Muslim majority country, because you and I, we both know that there is a problem with between different sects of Islam that don't accept each other as valid Muslims, or as a proper Muslims, or like kind of pure Muslims, these kind of things we hear. How can we just get out of that victim mentality? Because I want to wrap up our discussion with hope. Is there any hope that we can bring this narrative out of this victim mentality and bring it into the modern day Britain where we are? I'm not saying it's a perfect country, but still we are striving for the better. When we are going to join that race, yeah, I want to say something in Urdu, that Deir Int Ki Masjid, I mean, they have their own separate, ghettoization where they want to live and they want to just live in, talk about their own issue, which are specifically affecting, you know, a certain section of Muslim community. It's not all about all Muslims, all Pakistanis. It's about certain sections. What is the hope? Don't laugh. I'm
Exactly that.
already, I'm already despair.
Honestly, the thing is, I think it's mixed. I think it really depends on your socioeconomic background as well. Like, there's a huge difference between uh, the Pakistanis who come from like the cities. They're from middle class, more professional backgrounds, and especially here in London, they're in a different league. You know, um, like the parties I've been to. Oh my God. And then you compare them with communities in other parts of the country, and you think, how is there this massive um, gap between the two? I mean, like when I was a teenager, um, there were certain things that I struggled with, growing up in a slightly more restrictive, conservative culture. I mean, mine was a little bit more liberal compared with other girls that I knew. Uh, but still conservative compared to, say, my English counterparts. And I thought, oh, give it 20 years and we will be miles ahead. And we're not. And and I think part of the problem is because a lot of these people stay in the same communities. They don't move out. They stay there and other people move out. Like let's say white people move out of the community, you have more and more other Pakistanis or other Muslims moving into the area. And because the demographic is changing, because maybe you have people from similar backgrounds moving in, there's just no incentive, or there's like there's less of an incentive for people, I think, to maybe change their ways. Whereas, people maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago, um, because racism was more rife, because there were fewer of them, people didn't want to be, conspicuous. They wanted to kind of blend in a little. They wanted to, they didn't want to stand out too much. And now it's like, oh, well, there's so many of us. We're so comfortable walking around with our own clothes and speaking our own language and practicing our religion. Um, and it's fine if you keep that to yourselves, if it's a very private thing. But when you try and impose it on others, that's when it becomes a problem. And because these areas, I guess, like I said, there's just less of an incentive for people to really change their ways. And I really want to be hopeful. Maybe there's a silent majority that are sick of this, like us. Um, but I think the problem is because a lot of these people from these communities, rightly or wrongly, they see themselves as under attack. And it makes them more defensive. And so they're not willing to, I guess, accept any criticism because they see it as an attack. And then what that happens is then you have people like maybe on the right or the far right or racists who jump on the issue and don't see the nuances. And that kind of discourse is becoming more normalized in the mainstream. And I can't see things getting any better. I hope I'm wrong, but I
Let's
think it's very
I
depressing.
know it's a hope against hope for now, but let's hope for the best in the future. Thank you so much, Iram, for being with us. And it's been a huge pleasure to have you on AFI podcast and your insights into these issues, which are very much crucial at the moment, not within the Muslim community, but also in the mainstream society. And your voice is very important. I wish you all the best, and I would like you to share your, where our audience can find your work. Please share the links or the website with our audience. That would be a pleasure, if they find your work because you're doing incredible work.
Yeah, so you can find my Substack off the record with Iram. I put most of my articles on there. So yeah, please do subscribe if you can.
Thank you so much, Iram. Thanks a lot. And thank you all. Without you all, we cannot make our podcast successful. And of course, the guests we invite, their insightful input is a testament that how we take these issues seriously. And we really want to have an open and frank discussion on this issue. Thank you so much.